Hello and welcome to the good, the bad, and the ugly for Nova Roma, a city builder with great vibes. At least the vibes are great so long as you keep the gods happy enough that they don't burn your city down. The story premise is simple. Rome has fallen, and it's your job to build a home for the survivors. When I came across this game a couple months ago, I enjoyed the demo, so much so that I reached out to Hooded Horse, and they were kind enough to provide me with a key for the early access. Currently, I'm about 15 hours in, I have a thriving city of over 2,000, and so it's time to talk about the good, things I like about the game, the bad, things I think could be improved over the course of early access, and the ugly. Pet peeves that don't really matter, but they just kind of bother me. And so let's get into it. The first thing that stood out to me when I tried the demo is Nova Roma's progression system. Because early on, your goals are to meet the basic needs of your citizens. This means things like building a forester, so you have enough wood that everyone can heat their home and not freeze to death in the winter. Generally, citizens do not like being popsicles. Also constructing farms so your people have food to eat. Otherwise, they might start taking eat the rich a little bit more literally, and you don't want that because you're probably rich. Or building a temple so the gods don't burn your city down, like I mentioned in the intro. You know, all the basics you have to look out for in everyday normal life. But if you want to unlock new buildings, you need to begin by pleasing those oh-so-fickle gods. Complete a few tasks for them, and you unlock points that you can use to unlock new buildings. So here we have the game's technology tree. Now, one of the first things that you're likely to unlock are small insula. This is an upgrade from the humble hovel where your citizens begin living. It has space for 12 residents, making it more space efficient. And you can even build shops like a food counter in the lower floors. But from there, you can unlock medium insula. It takes up as much space as 2 small insula, but whereas those would hold 24 residents, this holds 30. Then large insula goes with you building up rather than building out, holding 40 people but taking up the same space as a medium insula. Similarly, you can enhance existing buildings. The fire brigade is a perfect example of this. They go around putting out fires and are a little bit more professional than the volunteer firefighting force. But if you give them fire engines with cute little horses and all, well, all of a sudden they are far more effective. All of this takes favor. And unlocking things is not merely about making your city look prettier, though in some cases it certainly is. It is not merely about meeting the needs of your citizens, though in some cases it certainly is. It's also about building things out and unlocking new features to interact with, such as defenses or water features or military. So you're going to spend a lot of time keeping those gods happy and completing their tasks, and if you're out of tasks, don't worry, you can just hold a festival. This means no matter what you're doing in Nova Roma, there's always an easy path of I do X, I get Y, which allows you to progress forwards. And I like this because in a lot of sandbox-based city builders, I tend to get a little caught up on the sandbox part, where there's a whole wealth of possibilities, and I'm like, okay, but what do I do first? Oh, I should do this. Wait, no, I should do that. And I get stuck in decision paralysis and don't end up doing anything. It's why I generally tend to prefer survival-based city builders, where there's always an outside threat that I have to immediately deal with. But instead, you do a task for the gods, they give you some points, you unlock a new building, which often generates or interacts with a new resource that you then need to integrate into your supply chain, giving you a reason to complete more tasks for the gods, which of course then unlocks new buildings, which give you new resources, and so you continually smoothly progress forwards. I generally tried to build in a slight oversupply whenever I added something, and that went pretty well, just so I would avoid any sort of city death spiral where a disaster caused me to run out of food or something like that. Really bad if that stuff happens. Don't do it. It was also very satisfying to replace an outdated older city block with a shiny new quarter full of bigger, grander buildings. Though I do have some small complaints about that, which I'll get into later. Something else very cool about Nova Roma, those gods don't just provide technology. Their smaller temples also provide buffs to adjacent buildings. So I was thinking of ways to fit temples into my housing blocks or industrial districts to take advantage of the buffs that they offer. They're not quite as powerful as in the demo, though to be fair in the demo they're super overpowered, so it feels a lot more balanced now. Also, speaking of progression, if you want to see my thoughts on how to get started in Nova Roma, I'm considering making a tips and tricks, mistakes to avoid, or beginner's guide style video to help you get started. Get subscribed, that way you won't miss it. Also, that way you won't miss any of my thoughts on other games that I check out. And next up, I want to talk about the water system, because it's kind of awesome. Every island has a water source, and you can build aqueducts in true Roman fashion to distribute that water to your citizens. but it's not as simple as river plus aqueduct equals water for your city. But water has a flow rate. Also, aqueducts respect height. You can dam the river to create a reservoir, and if you start harvesting too much, the downstream flow decreases. Initially, many of these cool features frustrated me, because all I wanted to do was make an aqueduct, but it was at the wrong angle. Or I had to go from so far away that I didn't have the materials. Or I couldn't get water to my city because the river where I was building my water source was at a lower elevation than the city, and water doesn't flow uphill. I don't know if anyone's ever told you that before. But as I kept playing, I realized something. If I make one giant dam close to the source, I could create a reservoir, and then I can use that reservoir to easily provide water to my entire city. After this clicked, I didn't have a big water problem. In fact, after it clicked again, I went back and I redesigned my water system. Instead of just going, oh, I need a source, so I will build a source, I went, okay, I have this much flow rate from my source. How can I best distribute that across multiple water towers in my city so that each area only gets what it needs? Once doing that, I found the water system to be really good, actually, especially with the physics sims. That part, very impressive. Just make sure you build some dams if stuff tends to flood, because yes, your city can absolutely get flooded and buildings will collapse, which is not a good time. And then last up, the game just has a nice vibe. And playing on normal, it's a pretty chill experience. Yes, there are disasters. Some of them, most of them in fact, have workarounds. For example, my city often got hit with heavy rains, which early on resulted in flooding. So I built that dam and reservoir system. That way I could hold the excess water, keeping it from spilling over into my city. In fact, I might have even been able to use it for something, but because water from those floods was temporary, it drained away over time, I never actually built capacity because I didn't know how to get enough water storage, but it wouldn't be an issue for me later. Now, another example of what I mean by building with the vibes, roads are more of a suggestion than a requirement. Yes, you do need roads to an extent, but if I select building here, my buildable area expands pretty far out from direct road adjacency. So some of my districts, like this, I have a bakery that is not directly connected to a road, but it's close enough to all the housing that it's not really a big deal. Yes, a worker walking on this nice road will be a little faster, but they can just live right here or here or here, so it's not a big deal. One thing I did learn, which I'd probably do things slightly differently now, you do want houses next to roads because people get a happiness bonus from that. Similarly, there have been quite a few improvements since I played the demo, which means it's much less likely that your city is going to enter in a fail state. In fact, even since the early access launch, there have been 2 hotfixes with major improvements. So, my first city in the demo, really early on, a fire started, it collapsed a house. Because people died and I didn't have the technology to bury them, everyone was unhappy. This led to people leaving, which led to a high underemployment rate, which led to more services collapsing and more people leaving. Now, with this current city, there was a fire early on, and my citizens grabbed buckets and put it out, so I was able to keep building. The volunteer firefighter force is something that was added. It's an excellent change. The other reason I say this is a vibe is because the game does not shove resource gains or optimization in your face. Yes, you can click on any resource to see how much you are producing or spending and how much you lost because you didn't have storage. But most of the time, when I'm playing, I'm not actually thinking about that stuff. I'm just vibing, going with what feels right. Oh, a couple more charcoal burners. That sounds like a good plan. I only end up diving into the stat screen once every year or two, or if I notice a resource drop suddenly. And so far, at least on normal, that's worked great for me. Next up, the bad stuff that I found frustrating and hopefully gets resolved over the course of early access. If everything from the demo to now has been any indication, I'd say there's a good chance that it will be. So, as you could probably tell from the first section, I've been loving the game and I don't have many complaints. But sometimes I had some weird issues with resources, where I would out of nowhere see a big gain or drop in my resource network. That or a production chain would just break. I suspect this is mostly down to how storage works, where you can set storage limits on a per warehouse basis, but there's no easy way to do this at a city level. So sometimes storage gets full or things aren't being routed correctly, as there's no place to put stuff because when I made my big shiny new storehouse, I forgot to set it to specific resources and now it's just full of logs. Maybe this is my fault for building with the vibes, but I'd love a way to control storage at the city level so that I have enough space for everything. Second of all, when it comes to citizen demands, there are hard breakpoints. 199 citizens in the city. Everyone's chill. 200? Oh my god, everyone stinks. Build a bathhouse right now. A few times, this resulted in me expanding my city only to feel punished. And I did significantly worse once I hit that population threshold, because I needed favor from the gods to unlock the building to fix my problem. And it's not like I knew what was coming next. I didn't exactly build a new building and say, oh, I see, this requires this. Yes, some buildings will tell you, hey, they need water from an aqueduct. So I know, okay, I need the aqueduct technology before I build this. But most of the time it was just, oh yeah, and now because you hit this many people, they're real mad. And so I'd delete the housing and keep my population just under the limit until I completed a few more tasks. One thing that I very much liked about Anno 117 Pax Romana is it was almost always a smooth curve. So it wouldn't just be 199 to 200 all of a sudden, people need something. It would be 199 to 200, people start demanding it, and the demand increases as that type of population grows. Then, last but not least, combat isn't great. Now, to be clear, I generally prefer when city builders have an RTS style of combat where I can command the troops and fight off invaders if they're going to do combat. But I dislike the specific way in which Nova Roma handles it. From time to time, you get attacked. And this is my first problem, because you're on an island, so you can be attacked from any direction, meaning it's hard to plan defenses minus just kind of dotting walls and towers everywhere. In addition, being attacked does not seem to do all that much. They set some fires, steal some resources or gold, and then just leave. Maybe this is because I'm playing on normal and I've overbuilt my city, but given the cost of military buildings, I kind of wonder if it's better to just let them have their pillaging and then they'll leave you alone. Maybe super late game this would be bad, as the number of enemy soldiers does seem to continually ramp up and ramp up and ramp up, even though most of the time I only need 1 or 2 legions and some walls to deal with them. The combat itself doesn't feel super responsive. You're just kind of clicking and people are sort of walking across the terrain, and then you command them to attack and you just wait while they slowly kill the enemy. Since there isn't much of an impact, that's fine. But given how deep a lot of the other game systems are, I personally would like to see something more engaging from combat. Also, if combat isn't your jam, you can just turn it off, so that's pretty good. Yeah, overall it doesn't live up to my Scissor 3 expectations, as unfair as those may be. And there aren't that many things that I dislike. So let's go on to the ugly. The weird stuff. For example, you can directly upgrade hovels into small insulae by building directly on top of them. But you can't do this for any other building. I'd love to be able to build directly on top of more things to upgrade them into a larger building of the same type, provided there is the space. So if I have 2 charcoal burners directly next to each other, I'd love to be able to build a large charcoal burner on top of that. If I have 2 small insulae, I'd love to be able to build a medium insulae. I totally get space requirements, and if you have a small insulae and a charcoal burner, that's probably not going to work. But as long as there's the space in your building on the same type of building, I'd love to see a direct upgrade path. Next up, my citizens would often choose to work in a place that is too far away and complain about lack of sleep. Whether it's simply because they can't afford the taxes in the city centers, because they are literally plebeians, or they've been doing something else late at night. I saw that ZZZ over quite a few buildings. It did seem to randomly fix itself over time, and it was never a huge detrimental deal, but it was a little bit annoying that I couldn't get rid of the signs on the building, so I'd at least like to be able to dismiss them and basically say, yeah, I know this is a problem, but it's not a problem for me. And last but not least, this is a really stupid one. I don't like how the wheat looks. The game's general aesthetic is definitely happy blobby little trees, and I do like how most of the game looks. I'm just not a fan of a blobby wheat because it looks kind of blurry to me, which makes me think the texture hasn't loaded in. City Builder fans have been eating really well the past couple years, myself included. Last year's Anno 117 Pax Romana, incredible game. I had not played any of the recent Anno titles, but it really impressed me, both in terms of its approachability and the fact that you can go really deep and min-max a lot of stuff. Also, Farthest Frontier, the city builder from Crate Entertainment of Grim Dawn fame, released into 1.0 recently. Haven't gotten around to playing it yet, but it is on my list. Timberborn looks pretty interesting. That hit 1.0, also on my list. And now Nova Roma has dropped into early access, and so far it's great. Not to be confused with Romstead, a sort of colony builder, much more similar to Terraria or There Are Billions, set in ancient Rome after the city was destroyed, where you have to slowly rebuild. Yeah, there's a lot of options to choose from, and I couldn't be happier about it. So now I'm going to take you through a small tour of my city before wrapping the video up. This is the city I've been working on after about 100 years of progress. I started here. This was my original city center with just a couple of humble houses. Since then, I've expanded it into a large apartment block, and I've even built some domus, basically fancy residence for rich people, which I've luckily mostly been able to keep pretty happy, though they're much harder to keep happy than the plebeian. Over here is my original industrial district. As you can see, plenty of charcoal makers, and temples to Vulcan to buff them as much as possible. Over here was my original farming district, which then I expanded to here, and then I expanded to here, and now I'm expanding up to here. The farms must grow because the city is hungry. Nearby is my water management, which, as you can see, because it is raining, is flooding. I think I've finally engineered everything, though, so it won't cause any damage to my city. I had a couple little problems. This used to just be a wall, and then it kept washing away this farm specifically, so I built a little bit of a dam. I built a dam here, lowered the terrain level just a bit to create a nice reservoir. This just kind of lets spill over here. It's fine. Maybe someday I'll actually do something with that. As you can see, some of my citizens are taking shortcuts. I should probably just build them a nice bridge here instead of making them walk through the lake. But also, they could just go this way, and this way, and this way, and this way, following the road. But they just choose not to. And then next up, I've got my new housing block over here. Still a little bit of a work in progress, but plenty of space. And then this started as a fishing colony / a little bit of a slums. Now it's getting a lot better, although I forgot to rebuild this building after I got attacked. Whoopsie. And similar thing over here. Yeah, sometimes buildings are just slightly out of range of my masons, and I forget to fix that. But I have plenty of population. I have like 500 unemployed people. I should probably put them to work, so an extra masonry, that's not going to be a big deal. Like that. And yeah, that's just a quick overview of the city that I've built so far. As you can tell, I've done a mix of practical things and also nice aesthetics, such as this bathhouse, which definitely didn't need to have this split architecture, but it looks really cool, and I like it, so I built it. And so those are my thoughts on the Nova Roma Early Access after playing about 15 hours and more or less completing all the content that there is. There's a few extra buildings to build. Of course, the city can always grow, but I'm also very excited to see what gets added in the future. And if you want to keep up with my thoughts on all these games, then do be sure to get subscribed. If you want something else to watch, check out my thoughts on Anno 117, Pax Romana Next, or Menace, another awesome game in Early Access published by Hooded Horse. And of course, if you want to see my thoughts on all the games that I play, head over to my Steam curator page. Link down below, you can drop a follow. That way, every time I play something, even if it doesn't make it into a video, you'll see a short review going over my experiences. And so, with that said, thank you very much for watching to the end. I'm glad you've enjoyed. Be sure to leave a like, and I'll see you in the next one.